So, ladies and gentlemen, Excellencies, I wish you also warmly welcome here to Switzerland, and in the name of the government, I hope you will have a wonderful stay here, not only on your discussions, but also on the beautiful lakeside view here on the Lake of Zurich. Ladies and gentlemen, we can see what has happened so far. Over the last 100 years in Switzerland, our glaciers have retreated by over 50%. Since 1980, the concentration of CO2 in the Earth's atmosphere has risen by 15%, and the speed at which is rising is increasing. Temperatures around the world have risen on average by 0.74 degrees Celsius in the last 100 years, and you know much of this rise has occurred since 1970. At the UN Climate Summits, we discuss measures to stop this trend. We know what we have to do. And in Cancun, the world community therefore has agreed that temperatures should not be allowed to rise more than 2 degrees Celsius. The EU has committed itself to reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 20% by 2020, and Switzerland has done the same. However, at climate talks, everyone waits for the others to take the first step. The industrialized nations look to the developing nations and vice versa. One bold step would be an important step, for instance, on the part of the United States, China, or India. But just paying lip service to the problems will not lead to clear, binding rules on an international level. And this is what we want to have, binding rules. Much is left to volunteerness. We can no longer afford to do it this way because voluntariness is good, but it's not good enough because everybody finally thinks the other one can make the first step. Climate change is a fact. It is changing the world, and it is our duty to look to the future and react to it. This is the only way we can reduce and even prevent the direct and indirect economic effects of climate change. The nuclear disaster in Japan doesn't alter this fact, even if safety concerns have caused many countries to reassess their relationship to nuclear technology. This must not lead to a setback for our carbon reduction policy. On the contrary, we think in Switzerland we must coordinate energy policy and climate policy even more closely in the future. We know what we have done so far. 30 years ago in Switzerland, in response to the dying forests, we have introduced exhaust emission standards for cars. In 1990, we passed the CO2 Act to reduce CO2 emissions by an average of 10% by 2012. This means 4 million tons of CO2. Measures to achieve this include a carbon tax on fuel. Part of the revenue from this tax goes towards a program to renovate our old building stock. We are committing to reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 20% compared to 1990 by the year 2010, and even go further if other countries follow us. We have developed a strategy to produce electricity with as few carbon emissions as possible. As the water reservoir of Europe, we are in a privileged and strategically advantageous position in this respect. And yet, we must do much more. The nuclear catastrophe in Japan will, no doubt, have an influence on our energy policy, and so also fundamentally affect our climate policy. We could meet the looming shortfall in electricity by building new combined cycle powered plants, but we cannot do this without increasing carbon dioxide emissions. We are therefore focusing on improving energy efficiency and expanding the use of renewable energies and smart grids. In the medium term, there is potential in this area, but it will take time and it will cost money. The shift to a green economy, to a green energy economy, has already begun, and we will present in June our proposals to Parliament how we can accelerate the process. We are prioritizing new sources of renewable energy from biomass, photovoltaics, and geothermal energy, including an expansion in hydroelectric power. We also need to invest in infrastructure so that new renewables can be fed into the grid. We are focusing on improving energy efficiency. When buildings are constructed or renovated, it makes sense to keep increasing the standards of the technologies used: heat insulation, heat pumps, and solar thermal energy. Appliances should be clearly labeled, and there should be market regulations, international agreements with manufacturers, and incentives to use innovative technologies. Finally, we must invest even more in research and development. Currently in Switzerland, the public purse pays about 170 million Swiss francs. This is quite a huge amount, but I think we probably should increase also our investments in R&D, because R&D will be the key to have new technologies, to have realized research projects in solar fuels, to use photovoltaic solar panels, to have applications for the Grätzel cells, or to have a solution for electricity storage. With our green economy concept, we want a growing economy like many others, but one which conserves our resources. In this way, we can reduce our dependence on foreign oil, gas, and uranium. This will benefit the environment, this will benefit the labor market, and the whole of our society. In specific terms, we want to promote clean tech, increase resource efficiency in information and communication technologies, and create incentives to use natural resources in a more sustainable manner. Just as 60 years ago, we began to pay more attention to social concerns, today we must take account of the effects of market forces on the environment. This requires regulation, and this requires international consensus. To do this, we need to be able to measure the efficacy of clean tech. Switzerland has a long tradition and considerable know-how in assessing the effects of such measures. EMPA, the Federal Institute of Measuring and Material Products and Appliances, manages one of the most important databases in the world in this field. With our Federal Institutes of Technology and our Universities of Applied Sciences, we have a high standing in the world of research and application. Ideally, we can find a way of translating all this into widely recognized climate labels. I hope that your conference here today will make a considerable contribution to achieving these goals, because we as politicians, we need also the organizations, the producers, and the academic world to have a support and a base how we can transform our societies. We know what needs to be done on the international stage for climate policy cuts across economic, innovation, development, and agricultural policy. Action of this kind contributes significantly to mitigation and adaptation. I personally believe that there are 5 main principles we should need and head for. First, CO2 must come at a price. Then those who produce it will sooner or later try to reduce their emissions or try to eliminate them completely. Second, targets to reduce emissions must be set in all countries so that installations are not built with out-of-date technology, and the latest low emissions, efficient technologies and economical production mechanisms can be introduced. Third, climate policy must be cost-efficient and sustainable. This can best be achieved with price incentive mechanisms. This helps to raise people's awareness and leads to a change in our behavior. Fourth, the richer nations must support the poorer ones. Fifth, we must invest more in technological research, development, and technology transfer. Following Copenhagen and Cancun at the climate conference in Durban 2011 this year, we must succeed to agreeing on a follow-up regime to the Kyoto Protocol, which includes all producers of CO2 and not on a volunteer on a reliable base. We must help to create incentives throughout the world for producing new technologies and using fossil fuels more economically. For instance, by setting lower customs duties for green technologies, or by reducing subsidies for fossil fuels. In Switzerland, we support the developing and emerging economies in their industrialization process. We have several environmental memorandums of understanding, for example, with China. We are working with other countries to set up similar bilateral agreements, as we have developed technologies which can help the emerging countries not to repeat the mistakes that we have done and made 40 years ago. When talking about a global reduction in CO2 emissions, we are also talking about the global imbalance in interests. Not all countries attach the same importance to climate policies. The developing and emerging countries want to benefit from globalization as quickly, easily, and as cheaply as possible. They want to fight poverty, and I understand this. This is perhaps not in line with our philosophy, but we have to tell them that a better quality of life, we need also to have a healthy climate and an intact environment. We, in the wealthy, industrialized nations, have a duty to set a good example. We have the scientific know-how and the financial means. It lies in our power to develop modern technologies to help protect the environment and to help others to follow us. I am therefore particularly delighted that Switzerland is hosting this PCF World Summit for the first time. We have no other choice, ladies and gentlemen. Our climate policies must succeed. I therefore call upon you here in Switzerland, together at this summit, the countries of the South and of the North, to work together with politicians, the business world, and the general public to share the responsibility to our climate. I think only this cooperation, that economic interests and ecological interests can be brought together with new technologies, with a long-standing philosophy, will lead us to a success. Therefore, I thank you for your support and for your contributions. Thank you.